Yeah. Is anybody there? Sorry, we're just being giggling. Oh, arriving.
Yeah, I think people are getting on.
Yeah.
Hey guys, hey
George. Hey man, you got to put up with this for a while. We just had massive giggles, so that's why I've got swollen eyes. It looks like I haven't been sleeping. I actually haven't been sleeping because my little boy is just not sleeping at the minute. Hey
there, Suki.
Hey Suki. Yeah, he's just not. Oh, you can see everybody that's online. I'm just a complete technophobe.
Shall I read some out? We've got Andy, we've got Bob J, Carlo, Daniel, Danny, David, Eric Brewington.
Hey Eric, how you doing, man?
George, of course. I don't know how to pronounce that actually.
Yeah,
Really sorry.
I've read loads of his posts as well. He on he?
Do you want to have a
go?
go?
On he. G on he. I've read your post. Man.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, John, Juna, Luke, Martin, Michael, Nathan Hulse, Pat. Well, there's loads of people.
There's
basically.
loads.
Tap Happy's
Hey,
on
Tap
here.
Dude.
Hello from Italy. Hey, hi Carl. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody. I was going to wear a Christmas hat today, but I couldn't find one.
I know we're going.
Well, actually, my son Story's got a Christmas hat, but it's a bit too small for my head.
Excuses.
What's the weather like over in Italy, Carlo? Is it as cold as over here? We had snow almost yesterday. In fact, some guy emailed me today from Montreal, and he said he was snowing in and working on some lessons. So that was pretty cool. So, hey guys, happy Christmas! I've got my I Love Mum mug, especially for this lesson.
I've got a season's greetings mug. So
what's on the other side?
We've got a.
Oh, it's a carol singer.
Carol singing penguin.
So just a couple of shout outs first. I don't know whether have we got Pat online or not?
I'm not sure if he's here actually. There's quite a lot.
Pat.
Remember Pat? Yeah, it could be, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Pat.
Oh yeah, Pat's here. Yeah, hi Pat.
Yeah, hi Pat. Yeah, here. If anybody is into salsa stuff or just want to kind of sort of like investigate getting into that side of bass playing, Pat's put up some absolutely awesome posts on this, like epic. He's put the videos on there, and he's put the lead sheets on there, so you can watch the videos and follow along the lead sheets as well. And if you haven't looked into doing salsa stuff before, and Latin stuff, it's really, really great for your time feel, because the music's felt a little bit differently, and there's a lot of syncopations in there, in sort of like pop music and country music and rock music. We generally play on the one all the time, so it's like 1 2 3 4 boom boom 2 3 4, whereas a lot of salsa and Latin music, they don't play on the one, they actually play on the 4 and or the 4 sometimes. And it's just, if you can get that down in your bass playing, it will have a huge effect on your time feel. Then if you actually listen to Pat playing, you can hear that his time feels really strong as well, and that I expect will come a lot from playing all that salsa music that he does. And he's got some videos on there of himself as well, so go check them out.
I think those kind of lines as well. I was thinking when I was watching that he does a kind of solo, and it's very much based. It's like a bass line that's been pulled out and elaborated. And I think that when we're soloing, often, like when I solo, I think, right, free melody, melodic lines, that kind of thing. We're just starting with a really heavy groove and developing it. Like the audience love that kind of stuff. Like someone like Kenny Higgins, a friend of ours we were talking about the last time, and
he plays with
Corinne Bailey Ray and a few other people. But just really developing those lines and repeated like ostinato figures, going over them and really like developing that. And I really felt that in in Pat's playing. I thought it was really strong.
I watched a Michael League interview actually. If anybody
he plays like that.
Yeah, like if you're into this, well, you need to get into this. There's a bass player called Michael League. League is spelled League. Michael spelled as you normally spell Michael, and he plays for a band called Snarky Puppy. And there's an interview with him on. If you put Michael League interview, it'll come up, and he talks. I think it's about probably 2/3 of the way through about grooving, and specifically expanding your groove and soloing as well. And the way he approaches soloing is really, really fantastic. And he does it from a rhythmical point of view, actually. He expands, he's talking about how he sees the solo as being part of the song and not just its own entity. You know, it's actually part of the song and part of the groove, and then you have to sort of like take that off as a lift off point instead of having a preconceived idea of what your solo is going to be. And it's really, and he plays in it as well. He plays a little Hofner violin bass, and really great. So go check that out, and it'll just give you a bit of an insight into what we're talking about right now. That's nothing to do with salsa music. We've kind of gone sort of like in a bit of a horseshoe there.
We've got some questions about where we are tonight, Scott.
We're in the same place. We're just in the same place.
You could maybe show people the Christmas tree.
Oh, yes, man. Yes.
We had to turn around at the last minute because of technical problems.
Here we go.
Just turn the stool.
Actually, yeah.
Turn the stool, mate. Leave it where it is.
Yeah.
And it's on a drum stool.
Turn the stool. Ready? There's my Christmas presents. Strawberry bonbons. These are really awesome bonbons, actually. And gourmet jelly beans. That's all I get now. I think as you get older, you just get less and less stuff. I can remember when I was a kid, you just used to get so much stuff, didn't you? And then you sort of like hit 25, and then you sort of like getting into the socks and peanuts territory. And then I think I'm sort of like 35 now, I think. I always forget. I think soon they're actually going to start taking things off me instead of giving me things for Christmas.
Are we here to talk about bass, Scott?
Yeah, we're here to talk about bass. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
I just turned around and I could hear bonbons. I was like, oh no, we're just crashing and burning here.
Yeah. Have anybody else to give a shout out to?
Marcus is saying that there's... Actually, I'll just tell Marcus. Hi, Marcus.
Hey, Marcus.
He was asking about there's a latency with the sound and the picture. And
that should normally sort of like it normally fixes itself. Actually.
Yeah, it's peak time in the UK here, and we keep saying we're going to change things, but we are going to change things.
Well, actually, I talked to a tech guy about it. I didn't mention it to you actually, and he said that essentially it's always a pain in the ass with this kind of thing because you're working on sort of like internet connections and peak times and different. I think is it last time we had about 5 or 10 guys that were having problems with the picture, and then some other guy in San Francisco was like emailing, fine for me, guys. So I think it depends on connections around the world and that type of thing. But last time it did actually sort of like catch up with itself, and we're fully linked up. We've got Ethernet cables straight into the modem and 60 meg upload speed and all that. So it should, fingers crossed, hopefully sort itself out. I think we might be doing some later ones as well next year, because I know the guys in the States, on the West Coast, it's early for you guys, even though right now it's 6 o'clock for us. But yeah,
we're going to try and reach as many people as we can.
We're going to try and reach as many people as we can, and mess around with some sort of like days as well. Like I've been kind of thinking about a Doom one over the weekend, but again, I think on the weekend you've got sort of like zillions of kids around the world all playing World of Warcraft, so I don't know what it'd do to the internet connection. So, but we can experiment.
I think it's a lot better actually. There's everyone's just about that seems to be okay.
Wicked. Well, we'll have a mess around with it anyway in the future.
Did you have some kind of competition, Scott?
Yeah, I've got a competition running. Yeah.
When does it finish?
End of the month.
There you go.
End of the month, guys. Going to get a looper pedal. So if you haven't, there's loads of people doing the challenge anyway. But if you haven't done so, go check it out because there's so much cool stuff over there. Adam's doing. Is Adam on?
Oh, there's loads of people on there.
Adam's doing the solo from Bright Size Life, which is a Jaco Pastorius tune. Well, it's a Pat Metheny tune, but it's badass, man. It's going to be killer.
Great tune.
Yeah, it's an awesome tune. Anyway, so just a bit of news as well. The course. I told everybody about the course. I said, it's going to be here before Christmas. And I really, really wanted to get it out actually tomorrow. We've finished it. It is all done. Jeff's done the transcription. I've done the videos. We're all ready to roll. We emailed the developer today. We received an out of office reply. He's on holiday. So hopefully he might get. We just need to sort of like knock up a bit of a course page so we can upload it. So it'll be coming over the next couple of weeks anyway. Hopefully over the next couple of days. I really wanted to get it to you on Christmas Eve as a bit of a Christmas present, a bit of a surprise. But we'll wait to see if he gets back in contact with me tomorrow. But if not, it'll be over the next couple of weeks.
It won't be much of a surprise now as well, will it? So
yeah. Well, yeah, no, it'll be fine.
Actually, on that note as well, with the we released a lesson today, one of the bass tips, and normally with the bass tips, because they're just kind of concepts, they're not. There's no actual specific, like musical instruction. It's just an idea or a concept. But a lot of the time, Scott does these introductions that are really cool. So on this one, I've transcribed the first, minute or two of that, and we're going to add that up later. So it'll be a shorter workbook. It doesn't need anything else. But I just thought you guys would be interested in that. So I have done that. But we can't actually add it to the site until we...
our developers got
So to be honest, it probably will be after Christmas. But it's not essential for the lesson. It's just for... I thought I'd mention it to you guys now because it is a really cool bass part. And it was... I think that a lot of people will want to play that. And you can get the chart for that.
The chart's in the
already.
Backstage area with the backing track. So if you download the backing track, you'll get a zip file with the actual chart in there as well. So you'll be able to sort of like see the chords I'm playing over.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, let's go on with some.
So should we do the first question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know what? Can I just take over? I've got a question actually. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jeff and I were talking about. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen this before, and it's a muting technique that I don't know how I missed it. I don't know. I'll wait to see what you guys say. It's a muting technique to give you sort of that old school sponge under the bridge sound. Okay, like if you haven't seen this before, guys like
it's Rocco Pestia.
Yeah, Rocco Pestia and like James Jamerson, Carol Kay, Bob Babbitt, Jerry Jamont. A lot of these guys used sponge under the bridge and had flat wound strings on, and it gave a kind of, if you can do it with a palm, okay, sort of like that kind of thing, yeah. I'm just going to put all this up actually. So I'm using my palm there to mute, not too much, and using my thumb as well. And I've always done it like that. Obviously you've got like that, but if you want the... And I did a tutorial on it as well. I think it's on the website. But you can actually there's a technique that people use where they do a similar thing, but instead of muting with the palm of their hand like this, they mute with their fingers here. So essentially you play everything with one finger, okay, but you rest the rest of the fingers over the strings, but not so you're pressing them down, just so they're literally rested on, so they mute it. So here it is without it. Here it is with it. Without it. With it. And it gives that. And it's something that I think I came across it about a year ago, and I saw a few guys that I was really into using it, and I've just been trying to work it into my playing and get used to the feel of it. It feels really awkward to me at the minute. I haven't been really working on it for a year. I kind of found out about it a year ago, and then I just heard a guy called Danny Mo Morris, who is one of the bass teachers at Berklee College of Music, and he uses it all the time. There's some great videos online of him actually playing only using one finger, like he uses the other. You can use the other fingers, but when he uses this technique, he uses one finger and kind of just sort of like moves around, and it's an amazing demonstration actually of how much you can do with just one finger. It's really great to see. I don't know, you just associate sort of like all these notes with like, having to move your fingers around like crazy. But when you hear him do it, it becomes apparent how the actual the picking hand and the rhythmical, the stuff that you do rhythmically when you're playing has such a huge part to do with the actual overall sound of your bass lines. And sometimes it's not to do with how many notes you're playing, and you can actually, it sounds like you are playing a lot of notes, but you're just playing with one finger. Same as Jameson, he just played with one finger on his right. He used to call it the claw. Was it the claw?
I think
the
that's
hook.
wasn't it like
The
thumb,
hook.
thumb and one finger or something?
No, it's just one finger. That kind of thing. I think they called it the hook or the claw.
Something like that, yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah, but if you guys, has anybody heard of that?
I'm sure they have, yeah. I don't. No one's chipped in, but I'm sure that's fine.
Chip in, guys. Come on, chip in. Let's hear
Oh,
from
Pat
you.
says he shoves an old sock under there. I think he's talking about the fridge.
You could put a sock under there.
Yeah, just do that.
But check that out. The guy from Bruno Mars, actually, he uses it a lot, and there's some great bass lines on that album.
Oh yeah, that's
Unorthodox Jukebox. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Unorthodox Jukebox by Bruno Mars. That album. The guy, I can't remember his name. He's got such a cool name as well. The guy plays a P bass, and there's some really great bass lines on that album. And the bass is really clear as well, and it actually kind of sticks out as an album for me. To sort of like in these modern times where everything's programmed and stuff like that, it's just really nice to hear an actual, real bass high up in the mix.
It's like that CeeLo Green record, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
with
like
that old school
yeah.
sound. Yeah.
I love that.
Anyway,
the
enough
bass,
of what I
the
wanted to
bass
talk
player
about.
actually for Bruno Mars's band. If you could get him on for an interview, I would just die with excitement.
Yeah.
I actually can't remember the guy's name, but I just
Jamal.
well,
It's Jamal.
yeah,
I can't remember his surname.
yeah, he is incredible. Anyway, let's get to it. We've got the world's most patient person here, Daniel, at the end of last week. I can remember. Yeah, in fact, he asked it quite early on, but we couldn't get to the question, and it's quite a big one as well. But he's first up today, and he asks, Scott, I read that you worked as a musical director. Could you tell us how does the job of musical director look like? What are his duties and responsibilities?
What does it incorporate?
What do you do? What does it mean?
What does it mean? It means a lot of stuff, actually. It's completely different. It depends who's employing you. For instance, it can be anything from just, turn up at rehearsals and make sure. Essentially, you're the band leader. As a musical director, you're there to just make sure the band are tight. Everybody's fitting in. The parts are right. It could be to do with arranging the tunes as well, and that could be actually writing out the parts for people, or just arranging it on the fly in the rehearsal room. So you're giving people direction, sort of like, for instance, the guitar player could be playing a part, and it might not be quite right. So you're giving him a bit of a lead of what to do. The drum part, you might want a specific thing, and then from then just directing the band, making sure that they're going up when they need to be. What's the word for it? They're hitting all the light and shade, all the keyboard sounds are right. Everything really, but it also involves, and that's the fun part. That's the fun part. I love that part, and I could do that all day long. But I've also been in a situation where it actually means musical director means you're basically the father of the band as well. You're the dad, and that means that you're making sure people have got their passports. You're collecting passport details and making sure that the record company have booked those flights. You're making sure that people are getting to the airport on time, because if I've booked somebody, or generally as well, when I've been doing it, I can kind of have the band that I want. So that means when you're standing there at the airport and the trumpet player isn't there, it's your responsibility. And if he's not there, your head's going to be not on the chopping block, but I'm going to get in trouble if he's not there. So it's everything from organising the band, sort of like musically, to making sure people are turning up. And obviously it comes to booking the right people, but I am, and Jeff will tell you as well, that musicians in general aren't the most organised group of people.
Look at
and
these bass hangs.
yeah. You know, it's sort of like strawberry bonbons I end up talking about. But so and that's the part of the job that I really don't I don't look forward to, because you know there's always flights to get and people to organise to get to those flights and make sure they're on board and make sure everything's sort of like running smoothly. So and that's part of the job that I don't really like. But the rest of it is just plain sailing. Really.
Mate, I think it comes down to three things. You've got the best. Well, the most obvious bit is that you'll be directing the band, bringing in cues, bringing in different members of the band, and in the rehearsal, you'll lead the rehearsal. You'll be like, let's get this done. You're focusing on the parts that need rehearsing. The second bit will be you'll be liaising with most likely a singer or the person who the band is backing, or maybe the cast if you're playing in a show.
Very much so, yeah.
You'll be taking you'll be giving them directions, and you'll be the go-between. So that's the musical kind of side of it. There could be arranging duties. The third part of it, and this is where it can kind of really grow depending on the size of the thing, is that you'll be organising people and you'll be making sure that the guy's there. But in say if you were doing a touring show, it's most likely that you'd have a stage manager who would do that.
Yeah, if you're in a touring show.
There's going to be different kind of levels, and if you're on a ship, it might be that the cruise director does more of that, but it might be, certainly if there's a problem, you're going to have to help deal with it. So it's not all music. There is always some kind of admin. But of course, there's also, it's nice to get a few of the extra, a few extra quid in
extra dollars. Yeah.
So it's a great question.
It's really interesting, actually, what you said about liaising with the artist. So, for instance,
if they're
that's a big thing, sort of like. So, for me, I was playing with a singer who was signed to Sony or something, and she was big over in Eastern Europe. And we were doing, and it was kind of sort of like, it was really full on, we went over there and I think it was like a 30,000 seater stadium, and it was really sort of like, had to be on the money, there's no mistakes, and there was no rehearsals. It was like I had to arrange the band, I had to rehearse the band in the UK, then we flew over to Poland to do the gigs. And we were on stage, and it was just sort of like getting a line check. We had a run through of the tunes on stage, but it was very much, if anything went wrong, the artist is looking at the musical director. She's sort of like, sort this out.
Yeah.
Make this right. You need to make it right. It's it's like you're the foreman. You just if anything goes wrong, you need to make it right. And that's where I would actually say, I don't know what you think, but as a musical director, you need sort of, and I think it's something that can definitely be learned, but you need nerves of steel sometimes, because I've definitely been in situations before where, as well, and some band members really getting a bit nervy sometimes, especially when the audience
great
is
people
huge.
skills. You've got to deal with all these people that are freaking out. You've got to deal with the problem. Whenever there's a problem, it will end up going back to you. So whether it's a problem with a guy sick or something, or it's a musical problem, whatever it is, the drummer can't play, they're not going to speak to the drummer, they're going to speak to the musical director, and then he's going to speak to the drummer. So there's a bit of politics involved, but I think that calmness, and also when I've done musical direction on stage, and I haven't done that much, but when I've had to, it's a lot harder than you think. Even just bringing somebody in, nodding people in and what have you. I mean, it's one thing to do it in a jam session, but to do it on a show...
The bass is like the last thing you're speaking about. Like you even think about.
Yeah.
You just don't even think about it. You're just worrying about everybody else.
And you get these keyboard players that are so good at it, and they're dealing with everyone else and all this. I've just been doing a show, and I was stood behind the keyboard player, and the whole show, he's cueing me with head movements. And you'd think that would be easy, but honestly, when you're in the heat of battle and you're looking at the music, and then you've actually got a written cue above it, give Jeff a nudge to make sure he comes in at the right place. Yeah. There's a lot to it, but it could be a really
musical directors
role.
With theatre shows as well.
Yeah. Well, this guy...
if they're looking up from the pit.
Yeah.
And the cast are looking down at the musical director.
Well,
and they're playing keys.
Yeah.
And giving the cast cues of when to sing and.
Yeah.
Like I did a show with Dave Keach and. Yeah. He must have had nerves of steel to do that gig. There was just so much going on.
Yeah, and they've got like TV screens so they can see other members of the band and the audience, and it's
really, really cool. It's sort of like on on the big shows and stuff, especially sort of like the theatre shows, it's so good to be able to see sort of like how much work goes into it. It's just mind blowing sometimes. You know, I love going to see musicals actually, which is great because my wife is really into them as well. So she goes to see the actual show, and I just go to listen to the band and just sort of like check out what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
That's a great question. Okay, so we've
Cheers,
got
Daniel.
another good question here from Scott's Space Lessons from Scott Selberg, and
Great
he's
name,
saying,
Great name.
and Scott's saying, how do you develop a good groove, and in particular, what do you see as the relationship between keeping good time and grooving hard?
I actually talked a little bit about this in the last Bass Hang. I think a lot of it, having a good groove and having a good foundation, is internal more than anything. It's more than the bass. And I talked a little bit about doing rhythmical exercises with your hands in the last Bass Hang, and essentially sort of like locking into the 16th note feel. So if you were playing something like boom, ba boom, boom, ba boom, sort of like, you know, that boom, you know, it's sort of like the time is like, that's where the quarter note is.
And it's not bap 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 bap. It is. Well, it depends actually. How
Yeah, that's like a swung kind of.
But if you think if it's one or the other, it's going to be how you latch onto those subdivisions.
That's the one I'm feeling.
Yeah, as opposed to
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
might be that, but it's feeling what the division that you're playing is and the drummer is.
Yeah,
and
it's having a subdivided backdrop almost, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like
it's a great way of
a
putting it.
grid
It's a great way of putting it.
behind you. So as you're tapping your foot, boom, boom, internally you're feeling. Okay, and you can practice this with a metronome. You can actually practice just tapping it on your knees and stuff like that. But having that, essentially, the gaps that you're feeling are really small. They're as small as they can get without getting ridiculous, you know. And that just means by having this sort of like like what if you do? Yeah, we're doing triplets there. But if it was sort of like a straight rhythm, sort of like 1E and a 2E and a bump,
yeah, it's a different feel straight away.
If it was that kind of thing, that's the kind of groove that you would feel underneath that. And it just gives you don't have to, you don't have to be stamping your foot. You just need to be internally feeling that sort of like that groove. And when I spoke about it last week, I'll just quickly go over this. Essentially, I did, I stepped in at a djembe ensemble for a friend of mine, playing percussion just for a few weeks. And over them few weeks, my bass playing, the rhythmical side of it, and my groove and stuff like that, everything to do with the rhythmical side of my playing, literally shot forward like huge. I'd never felt anything like that before, and suddenly I was like, groove has got actually nothing to do with notes at all. It's got nothing to do with notes. It's just rhythm. If you listen,
you mean pitches? Really,
yeah, it's got nothing to do with pitch or scales or. It's got nothing to do with that. Which is why when you listen to a drummer, you're like, whoa, yeah, it's grooving. He's not actually playing any notes at all, any pitches. He's just playing a groove. And that's exactly what you should aspire to do on the bass as well. You add notes on top of it, but the foundation of it, the actual foundation of that groove is the rhythm. So once you get the rhythm right, then you just add the notes on top. And that gives you your riff and, the groove of the song and stuff like that. And repetition is a big thing as well, making sure that you've got a healthy amount of repetition in your bass lines. I always use that. that tune, because it's such a grooving tune. What's it? Good Times is by Chic. And if you listen to the actual bass line, it's just going ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da. So if you actually, the rhythm is just ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba, and the guitar is exactly the same. And when you listen to the tune, it's grooving so hard because the rhythm is repeated. You know, it's not sort of like bid it but bid ba da da.
Yeah, it's not a theme in development. It's like sticking with it.
Yeah, it's like bang on there.
Can I just bring you back to this subdivisions thing? Because we've got a great question, but also you were saying about this, like providing this bedrock of divisions, and you know, like we just said then, if you've got the ticka, it feels very different. The groups of three.
Yeah.
Than it would do if it was ta 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 really straight.
1 E and a 2 E and
so
a 3 E
what
and a
that means
4 E
that you
and
can do really, you know, sort of quickly is imagine if that you were listening to something and you were blurred between the two. You weren't really sure. You were just hearing dung. Dung, da dung, you know, you weren't quite sure. Is it dung, dung, da dung, or is it dung, dung? You know, is it swung or is it straight?
Yeah,
Well,
is it dun, dun, da dun, or is it dun, dun, da dun?
Yeah, we're getting off on one slightly, but so if you've got this really good feeling of being comfortable with knowing what the divisions are that you're working in, then when you elaborate and you play your fills, they're going to fall on the nice beats. It's going to be really comfortable, and it means that you're not going to have to think too much about what the divisions are. You're just going to be feeling them, which is why people talk about groove, and it sort of sounds like it's some kind of magic thing. But Luke's got a great question, Scott, which is, do you guys literally count the divisions in your head while you play it, or do you just feel it?
Oh, feel it. I never count it at all.
I sometimes count it if I'm unsure, or if I'm thinking about the groove. If I'm playing something really simple and I'm just getting into it, sometimes I'll think about the divisions. But
just to sort of like reference it in your head, so you just think, oh, it's that.
Yeah, sometimes, but yeah. Or I'll try mixing them up. Like if I'm playing a ballad and it's a swing, I'll just suddenly go straight and I'll think about it in my mind as I'm playing the quavers. But I won't be thinking, you know, underneath as I'm playing. But what I might be thinking is like maybe the 1 and the 3.
Yeah.
You'll be thinking something. So there is some reference to it.
Yeah.
But it's not as literal as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know.
Yeah, I think about it sometimes. Like I'm playing and I think
it is about a feeling, but you've got to maybe for me, I had to logically work it out to really get good at doing it. And I think for a lot of people, it just comes naturally, and they don't really have to think too much about it.
I'm really analytical, actually, in general. I think when it's quite heavy, but going between that 4/4 and 6/8 feel is a really good example of that.
And that lesson is called, I can't remember, Awesome Subdivision Exercise or something.
Oh,
the one that you do.
It is called how to strengthen your swing feel.
Yeah.
It's in walking bass lines, and I talk about going through from a...
Oh, wow.
So that's like, just like 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I love that mix, you know.
So that's like 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. So that's like a 6/8, 12/8 kind of. So like,
and it's not da da da. Sorry.
It's hard, isn't
it? You know, Scott, just because we've got this ties in really nicely with the next question that Hutch asked, which is a slight variant on this, is that he was saying he enjoyed the. But where's he gone? Oh man, sorry, we're running out of space here on the screen. Okay. I really enjoyed the Joe Hubbard interview, and something that came out was about reading musical form. I really should have plugged that gap. Blah blah blah. Where are we? Basically, are you counting it? Like when but this is in the context of maybe a show or a sight reading session or something.
He's on about what we talked about in the interview was feeling the form.
He says, do you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4 in each form? So it's feeling the bigger movement of the piece.
I actually talked
groups of 4, groups of 8, 32.
I actually was talking about feeling.
Great question.
Form in so feeling bars of 4, feeling bars of 8, and feeling bars of 16, and even more feeling bars of 32. So if you don't know already, generally music is broken up into bars of 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Even numbers, right? And what I worked on is I'd listen to a jazz standard, and I can remember actually the specific tunes I was working. It was Charlie Parker tunes, and what I found is that, and if you're not into jazz yet, you will find this when you listen to it, and if you're just getting into jazz, you will probably find that this is the issue that you're dealing with, or one of the issues you're dealing with right now. So what I'd find is I'd put the CD on, or the tape or whatever I was using back then, and I'd listen to maybe, I don't know, sort of like 20 seconds, maybe more than 20 seconds. Let's be kind to me. Let's say 40 seconds, and I'd basically get lost within the tune. I'd think, where are they within the tune? It just sounds like, And then it was then that I realised that I didn't have a really strong idea, sort of like internal idea of form of that, of 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, 32 bars. I didn't have that naturally, which really, really helps when you're playing, in any situation, because you can sort of like be playing a chart, and if you sort of like can feel,
the resolution.
You can feel sort of like 8 bars and 16 bars really well. If you sort of like if the chart's quite complex and you get a little bit, I'm a bit blurry of what's going on. As soon as that you feel the 16 bars come round, you can just jump. You can just sort of like, that's where I am. And it really helps, and just sort of like improvise it. Well, not just improvise, but just grooving and jamming out with friends and stuff like that. Especially on tunes like "So What" by Miles Davis. A lot of you will have heard it. It's 16 bars. It's 32 bars of D minor. Okay, so 32 bars of D minor. That's a lot of So am I counting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2. You can't do it. 32 bars. If you have to play 32 bars of D minor, and then on that 33rd bar, you are going to E flat minor, the amount of students I've seen that just get completely lost within that 32 bars.
I don't think anyone's ever played "So What" anywhere without getting lost at some
there's
point.
Always
there's
somebody
one member of the band
always somebody
looking at the keyboard player's hands to see if they've moved on to the black keys.
Yeah, there's always somebody that gets lost in that
Usually
form.
it's me, by the way. But I think the thing with this about feeling the form that underpins it, I just was thinking, I'd never thought about how many bars of D minor that was. And for that tune, I am counting in a... Well, actually, I'm not, but I'm thinking about the melody.
Yeah.
And that's a really strong way to latch onto the form and to help starting to feel these sections. But you will start to feel the 8 bars, the 4 bars, the 16, and then you'll see the bigger picture. And it's all just experience, I think.
I was actually going to say that
melody.
Melody has got a massive... It's a huge sort of like key part to do with form.
Yeah.
If you were working on a tune such as All the Things You Are, or Autumn Leaves, or something like that, but if you're just starting out looking into tunes like that, if you haven't looked into any tunes like that, they're great starting points to just sort of like dip your toes into the water with a bit of jazz. And I'm not telling everybody to, you must be a jazz fan. It's I don't care if you're a jazz fan, but what you really should do, and what these songs, jazz tunes, they're called standards. What these tunes will do is give you an amazing way to learn the fretboard. that there's no songs. They are the best way to learn the fretboard, aren't they? Standards.
Yeah, because you're practicing harmony, and you generally wash the rhythm out. It's all 1, 2, 3, 4 in a bar. It's 2 in a bar, and it's the study of harmony. And I would say to anybody who's studying any kind of music, you have to study harmony. Jazz is the best way to do it because you don't have to think rhythmically. If you just do it as an exercise, and it is really enjoyable. And I mean, I say jazz. I mean, you could play it over any type of music. And these, like the harmonic structure as well with the phrases, just to tie it back a bit. Think about something like the Beatles and Hey Jude. You've got a big long na 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 phrase at the end, and then it sits and there's a perfect melodic shape to it and an arc, and then it finishes and then it starts again. And it's that kind of sort of experience. All this phrasing is there we all naturally or conditioned maybe to hear in these groups. Just to tie it up a little bit, one last thing which I think is worth mentioning because of the two questions is that it does help to start to learn to count divisions for when you're in reading situations. And there are times when I am literally there going 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's say there's an odd bar of 3 or something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Whatever. And I'm actually literally counting in my mind, but that wouldn't be in a kind of fun musical way. That would be I'm reading this chart and I really have to get it right. And there's a weird syncopation.
Yeah.
And it might also be the other time is if I'm transcribing it and I'm listening to Scott do something mental. I'm like, what beat is that going on? I'm there going once, I'm listening back to it and I'm really carefully trying to work it out. And I actually found when I started to do that, I can remember I found it quite hard because I'd find it distracting trying to think about what beat I was on. And like classical musicians are, good at counting rests, and we can talk about that another time. We could elaborate on that.
So Hutch, just rewinding right back to the beginning when I was talking about form. The way I worked on it was listening to Charlie Parker tunes, and the recordings were really bad and it was annoying. But it was, I was doing it just to get better. I knew that it was just sort of like a great way to sort of like expand my musical knowledge, and I was working on form. So what I'd try and do is I'd put it on in the car. I think it was actually. I listened to a lot of music in the car. Put it on in the car. I'd learn the head, the tune. So for instance, Have You Met Miss Jones? Have you met Miss Jones? Boo ba boo ba boo ba ba bi da di da di da do da. D da 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 da. So it's like 2 A sections, B section, then a C section. I think it goes back to the A. I sort of familiarised myself with the actual tune and whether it was like A B A or A B C. We'll get into that at another point. They're just sections of the tune. And then I put it on in the car, and I'd almost try and forget about the tune while I was driving. But every time it came round to the top, I thought, that's the top. Yeah, I know that's the top. But maybe be trying to sing the tune in my head. While, the soloists are going crazy, I'm just trying to sing the tune. Have you met Miss Jones? Over and over with these tunes. And by doing that, it just gave me a really good sort of like, a really good grounding in form and feeling 4 bars and 8 bars, 16 bars, 32 bars and that kind of thing. Because it's really sort of like, it's a valuable thing to have. And it's nothing to do with playing bass. It's just sort of like general musicianship is great to have that, that good sort of like solid grounding in form.
And people don't talk about that,
actually. I haven't really heard anybody talking
that was specifically what we're about. Okay, let's move it on then. So we've got a next question from... I must have posted this from somebody else. It's come up under my name, but it's obviously not from me. It's from somebody called P. I'm not quite sure. He must have emailed in and I've fired this across perhaps. I'm not quite sure actually what's going on here. But anyway, the question is, if I'm a beginner and I'm intermediate player, but definitely a beginner with theory, which I think a lot of people are, they'll start playing, they'll learn riffs, but their theory's not great. What should I work on first? Chords and scales, progressions, things like the cycle of fifths. He's just a bit unconfident, he's saying. So... Yeah. And then the next things I think we can just actually put to one side because you can answer that separately. They're not directly related.
Can you do a circle of fifths lesson? Can you prepare?
So.
Okay, so.
What do you think people should be working on first?
I always think, I always say that people need to work on chord tones first and arpeggios, and knowing how to add them into your bass lines in a way that's usable. Okay, so And what I mean by that is people learn arpeggios, I've had students come to me and say, oh yeah, I know all my arpeggios. Okay, so like they know their G minor, C7, whatever, they can play anything, all the arpeggios I ask them to, and that's really important to be able to do that. But as a beginner, you should be working on learning your arpeggios from at least like one finger or two fingers. I don't know if you've seen the arpeggio tutorials that I've done, but I talk about learning them from different fingerings. But what you should really, really work on, as well as learning your chord tones, is how to apply them to a bass line. And just to give you a little direction with this, what I mean by that is, say for instance there was a groove on a C7 chord or C major chord. Let's just say C major, okay? So the groove was sort of like, okay, and the keyboard player and the guitar player are playing their lines, their chords and stuff like that. It's important that you know what you can do with that, sort of like, how do these arpeggios you're working on, these chord tones, how do they sort of like link into that at all, And that's what a lot of people have problems with. They have this divide between the two. They have, they're playing and they have their theory, their scales and arpeggios and things like that. But it's important that you make the two meet and give the chord tones context. You need to get on in the arpeggios context. So for instance, if we were playing over a C major chord, piano players holding down a C major chord, we can play any of the notes of the C major arpeggio in our bass line. So this would be, so obviously we've got the root, right? And then just let's add the fifth in to the groove, okay? So if the groove was just sort of like, so the fifth of C major is a G, boom, bam, and it's always that interval, okay? It's always that interval, that shape, okay? That fifth is always, if it was an E, it's the same shape. And that's why bass is so cool, and guitar, you can sort of like remember these shapes. So now you've got the fifth, the root and the fifth, you can add it into your bass line. So
And that sounds so cool because you're developing it rhythmically.
yeah, I'm developing it rhythmically.
The palette's still very simple. It's two colours, the root and the fifth.
The root and the fifth.
But you were thinking rhythmically, like you were saying earlier, and that's why it sounded cool.
Yeah. So now, and remember, I'm thinking about arpeggios. So like root, third, fifth, and octave. So now let's add the third in, right? So same concept, just same groove. Fifth. Third. Third. Fifth. Root. Third. Third. Fifth. Root. You can really sort of like push the boundaries, and I'm just playing root, third, and fifth. So there, and that's like a massive, sometimes I say things and it's like they'll whiz by, I've just spoken about that. I've just spoken about that for like 2 minutes or something, but just that concept is a huge concept, okay? So for instance, it'd be great if you could get a, what's the software that Pat's been talking about? It's sort of like a backing track software. If you look at it, Ritmopat, he's on the campus. You'll see him all over.
It's called Chord Pulse.
Chord Pulse software. So it's like, I think it's downloadable for free actually. I'm not sure. And if it's not, I think the paid version is like $20 or something. So it's just, it's software so you can put in sort of like, 32 bars or, a zillion bars of C major, and then just practice creating grooves over that C major, but thinking about, okay, so start with the root, add the fifth in, add the third in, and then maybe sort of like think, okay, now I'm going to create I've been working on my, say, C minor arpeggio. Create a groove with just as a C minor, and then go through the same thing. So by doing this, you're working on your arpeggios, but you're putting them in a musical context. Okay, so that's sort of like one exercise you should do, and that will be a lot of work just to do that. Also, if you're a complete beginner, you should be learning people's tunes. All them songs that you love, okay, you need to learn them. So sort of like think to yourself, okay, I'm gonna like think, right, this month, okay, so like January's coming up, right? Pick a tune. I want you to learn that tune. This is really important as a beginner bass player. This is like fundamentally sort of like one of the most important things you must do. And people get so carried away with the arpeggios and the scales and stuff like that they forget to just learn great tunes. And this is exactly how you learn to speak, by listening to your parents speak. You just copied them, yeah? So you just need to, find some tunes that you really like, pick one and learn it. If you want to push it one more step, once you've learnt it, maybe then try and look and see if you can see any arpeggios that are being used in there. That's a really cool thing to do. Or any scales, I always try and get people to sort of like be a little analytical of the songs they're learning.
I was going to ask exactly the point I was going to make, actually, that like you've got this idea of like the concept of chord tones, and then you're applying them. And then you've also got the music that you've been learning for fun, if you're learning whatever riff, and and you then work backwards and have a look and see how is it working? How are these notes working within this context? And that will then inspire you to create more bass lines, which you'll then play, and then you'll and this circle will kind of continue.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good to sort of tie it back. Pat mentioned as well that it's $25 for the chord pulse. So
$25.
Yeah.
It's a really cool piece of kit.
Oh yeah, and he also says go to my practice log and see some good examples of me playing over a C7 groove using chord pulse, and also check out I Remember Clifford.
I love that tune, by the way, Pat.
Yeah.
It's got a little drum machine as well built in.
And Pat's fills are awesome, aren't they? There's it's just develop, and then what Pat's doing there is developing the line. So it's like you've got this idea of C7, and then just like play it all. It is just unbelievable the amount of ways that you can play it.
It's huge.
Yeah, it just goes on forever. Like Scott could show me something now, and I'd be like, I haven't thought about it that way. And I could probably show Scott something. He'd be like, I haven't actually done it in that particular combination.
Yeah.
So like all of that stuff, I think will come. There's a couple of other questions which are big questions, and which are, can we do a circle of fifths lesson? And I think this is interesting because me and Scott have spoken about this, but I think it's a big subject.
Yeah.
And I think we should maybe talk about it next time.
I actually recommended that somebody did it the other day.
Did you? Yeah. Well, I love it. You see,
Jeff
and
loves
Scott's
it.
not
I'm
into
like,
it.
What's all this circle of fifths?
It's my favourite
about?
ever exercise ever. It's the best thing. So we'll make. I don't know. We could talk about that now. We could talk about it another time. It might be a bit of a big one to do.
It's
now.
a big one.
Let's do it another time because it's an interesting one.
It's funny though because I saw a load of people, on the campus, saying, "No, I'm doing my circle of fifths exercises."
Right on.
And I can remember right on. I can remember doing doing these circles of fifths and just thinking, "Oh man, this is boring." And I said to Jeff, I was like, "This is boring." Jeff was like, "That exercise did more for my playing than
Somebody
any
asked
other
me this.
exercise."
Somebody asked me this the other day. Seriously, what is the biggest thing that anyone's ever given you, like material wise, to practice? And I would say, without a single moment of hesitation, applying the cycle of fifths to practice arpeggios.
I know nothing.
Without a doubt. But we should talk about that another time, and maybe we'll do it. In fact, maybe we'll do it next time because I think it is a great subject. And
it is a great subject.
And also, maybe Scott will do a lesson on it. It'll be quite funny, actually. Okay, and also, can we prepare some chord charts? Like the PDFs where you do the lessons. And I think what you're asking here actually is regarding the kind of stuff that we're going to have in the beginners stuff that you're going to record in January, and we're going to have these reference books with arpeggios and scales and chord shapes, whatever we're going to try and get as much as we can together.
Yeah, we're doing a beginners course.
We know
in
that
January.
we need that, and that's something that we're
doing a beginners course in January, and I'm doing a whole load of lessons as well. And
okay,
and just let me tell the guys this because it's so funny. So my wife is so into Christmas, it's painful.
He's ruined Christmas.
Right, and I'm like looking at my diary, and I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to work right over Christmas trying to like get all these backing tracks together. So
Yeah, I was going to say, Scott, can I have a holiday next week as well?
nobody email me next week.
yeah. If you want any replies to emails. Right. Okay. So just if we could sort of move quite quickly through these next ones, so we can get to some of the live ones because we're nearly at the hour mark now, Scott.
Man.
So, and I think this is quite So Phil Bass, 40,
Hey Phil.
and he's done loads of amazing stuff.
Phil's on it, man.
He's all over it actually, and he's got a really specific question. When practicing arpeggios, is it important to keep the same fingerings when you're playing up at the bridge end? And he says he finds it impossible to play the high D arpeggio and play the pattern as with a second. So do you keep? I think what he's saying.
That one.
I think actually is it up at the dusty end, mate? Are you maintaining the hand shapes that you use at the lower end?
Yeah.
I hope that's what you mean, Phil.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Is it the dusty end he's talking about?
I think the bridge end, yeah. So that's.
I can talk about both actually. Yeah, essentially, sort of like if it was a D minor. I can't remember what your bass is, Phil. Maybe it's sort of like on this bass. It's sort of like, you know, I can kind of get in there. That's the D minor there. So yeah, I'm using the same fingerings. If you're actually talking about this end, I just want to talk about this because some people do have, for instance, you know that huge. It's a pretty big. If you were playing a D minor down here, right, starting on your fourth finger, which is, you know, D, F, A, C. That is a huge stretch, right? And I see students doing this, right, going. I've got big hands, man, and I can. Do you know, like doing that finger per fret thing, and like, well, I do a finger per fret kind of, but down here it's too much. It's too much to do this, you know, all the time. It's just sort of like you're gonna get strains and everything, and you can actually, if you look at my hands, can you see that? It's no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going. Which is what a lot of people try and do. I'm going, and here's my second finger, and I'm moving to the F. And that is a really great little practice thing to try and just get that move. And again, sort of like, say for instance, it's basically moving between two notes and moving your hand to get there. So for instance, if I wanted to make this stretch, okay, so a C major, okay, C major arpeggio is C, E, G, B, and C. So I could do that and just actually stretch that huge 5 fret. And I can do it. You know, I can do that. But also, but I don't... see that? I'm not doing this. Can you hear any difference in the sound?
Yeah.
It's really slight though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You know, you don't want to be doing, you know, it's just, it's crazy. So, and that's how a lot of people with small hands, I get a lot of emails saying, how can I do these crazy things? You know, I've got tiny hands. And I'm like, I don't do that. You know?
Do you never play in that with that kind of, would you never play like, you know, like a context like that? Because I have a really clear way of thinking about it, where that for me, I think of it as an extended hand shape.
Yeah.
And I would only I would normally have either the open hand shape with one finger per fret, or what I call like closed hand shape across 3 frets.
Yeah.
And the extension would say I was playing like a major arpeggio where I wanted to play C, E, and I want it to be really connected. But it's unlikely that you would choose to. I guess you shift as you're moving across. Yeah.
It's so huge.
It depends on the context, really.
If it was just going up an arpeggio, I would.
Yeah.
And I know there it actually looks like I'm going like
It
But I'm
depends
not
whether
at all.
you would only need to maintain the handshake if you had to return back to the C. If you were going to continue up, you could close the hand in the shift. See my point?
Yeah.
Like, what if you're playing E? Well, you probably wouldn't play it like that, would you?
Yeah, well, if I was playing. My point is that people with small hands, you don't have to do these massive stretches. You can. What you need to do is get really, really finely tuned into moving between two notes. And there's hardly the gap in between them notes is like milliseconds. Just between C and E, it's not. It's not that. It's some E with the little finger, C with the first.
Scott. Mystery. So listen, we've just gone
Jacko.
7 o'clock, and we've got some. We haven't even got down the first page, mate. Of the,
We never get down the first
we're
page.
now. So listen, but I mean, there's still a lot of guys on here who are asking questions. Shall we maybe have a go at the live questions?
Yeah, man, hit me.
And then we'll maybe return back, hopefully, because I mean, there's that chicken comment. You know, one about the chicken. I think that's maybe for another day, mate.
Note to
Again,
self.
Yeah, that note to self, the chicken.
I can actually do that in like 2 minutes.
Can you? Do you want to do the chicken because you've written that?
Nathan, so the chicken really screwed me up. Like everybody else, the chicken is a tune by Pee Wee Ellis, and it was made famous, I think anyway, by Jaco Pastorius. That kind of thing, right? So, and when I was listening to you play it, Nathan, it was this specific line, I think. Yeah. It's over the E flat, I think. So it's like. I think it's that. I can't remember if it goes down to the B flat, but on that. And it was them specific lines that I just did it over and over again on gigs, and I just couldn't get it tight. And then I literally worked on them one week and just took that one pattern. So I'd take a pattern that I was having difficulty with, and I think Jacko has like about 4 or 5 sort of like a. That's one that he does. And what I'd do is I'd actually just take that sort of like I think it's like a bar, and I'd just repeat it round and round and round again. So instead of trying to play it in context of the actual song, because if you do that, it's sort of like every 16 bars you maybe play that one thing, okay? So it means if you practice that one thing for sort of like half an hour, it's only every 16 bars that you play it. Whereas if you just take that one chunk out, anything you're having sort of like difficulty with like that, you should separate it out and then repeat it over and over again. Get your fingering right first, so you're playing the same fingering every time. Like I'm barring that. I don't know that. It's that old pivot thing that I talk about. Repeat it like that. In my experience, why I'm telling you to do that is I didn't really understand how powerful that was by just sort of like taking them little chunks. And again, the other one there.
That is awesome.
I just take that one chunk and just do it round and round. I did this over a week, and I went back to do the gig that I'd done the week previous. And that week previous that I was playing, I was just like, it wasn't punchy. It was just a bit sort of like soggy, a bit spongy, And like, when you listen to Jacko play, it's like, it's just like, real nice and tight, isn't it? And I went back, and while we were playing it, I just glanced at the drummer, and he shouted up at me, "Wow, you've been practicing, haven't you?" I just thought, wow, it made a difference.
Does it work, practice?
Practice works.
Wow.
So, and what it was just taking them little, because it's them little pieces that sort of like, give the life to that bass line. So just take them little, loop them round.
Yeah.
Practice them for like 10 minutes at a time.
Okay,
anyway.
So we're going to try and fire out some questions now. Just one thing that on this page that we've been working through, Travis was asking, he wants to know your thoughts on raking when descending versus alternating. And we're not going to have a chance to do this, Travis, but actually Scott's got a lesson where he really covers this in a lot of detail already, which is called right hand alternating fingers, something like that.
Yeah, it's in the technique
It's in the technique section, but basically, you choose and go with it, but it's something that we've spoken about a bit before, so and it's quite a big subject as well.
I use raking.
I
use raking. I just like the sound of it, and players that I really like Richard Bonner, Jacko. They use raking, and that's why I like it. Gives a particular sound.
I think it's good to do both and to learn.
I think
to have control over what you're doing.
Yeah,
and I liked Scott's approach in the lesson. He talks about choosing one and really sticking with it and developing it.
Yeah.
And I think the worst thing is when you've got this weird kind of hybrid mix and you don't really know what you're doing. And you just and when you go down, you lose the rhythmic kind of intensity because you're moving your whole arm rather than. Anyway, I think we should leave that for the lesson.
Make a choice.
Yeah.
And go with it for like a couple of months and see how that feels. With anything like that, just make a choice and work on that for a couple of months. Give it sort of like time to settle in, and then if it doesn't feel good, try alternating. That's what I did. I just did, raking for. I actually tried. I could play alternate anyway, but I really tried to sort of like just hone in on one and just think if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. So I did it for like 2 months. It just didn't feel quite right, and then I started doing the raking. I was like, oh, that's the sound that I want. So and that's why I went with that. But yeah, just make a choice, do it for a couple of months. If it doesn't work out, no sweat, just go to the other one.
It's like the fingering thing that we're talking about just then. There's so many ways to play the bass, and it is so personal. And, there isn't really a right or wrong answer. It's what's right for you. And I think just making a considered choice from... And as I say, the lesson is excellent, and the workbook's really good as well, because Scott's... I can remember the stuff he wrote was really interesting about that. So we've got the question from Ollie, and he's been waiting... he asked the first question, and he wants to know... How do you prevent your sound from losing its quality when playing live? How do you record the sound that goes into the main mix, which is a separate question?
How do you prevent your sound from losing quality when playing live?
Yeah, have you got any tips? And a few people have asked about live sound setup and.
Ooh, it's a big question. This.
Yeah.
It's tough. Sound live is tough, because of problems with rooms and stages, and where the stages are hollow or you're playing on floorboards or all these different things kind of come into it. I always try and have a big enough amp. Like me personally, I use 2 1x12s, and it moves enough air for me to hear it and feel it. I'm always really aware of what I want to hear on the gig. Obviously, you've got to listen to try and take into consideration what the audience hear. But it depends whether you're playing through a PA or to a bigger audience, or whether you're playing like a club gig. If you're playing a club gig, you're not really going to be mic'd up or DI'd or anything like that. So just trying to get a good tone, for yourself is the most important thing. Experiment with getting it's good to sort of like know little tricks, like if you're playing a particularly boomy place, that's sort of like some rooms when you play them, just because of the shape of the room or whatever,
Tile floor, lots of glass.
Yeah, just it booms.
Boom it, yeah.
It gets really boomy. So in that case, it helps to actually raise it off the floor, the amp. And you can just use like a beer crate, or you can actually get these things. I can't remember what they're called. The company make them, specifically to put your bass amp on.
I forgot what they're called as well. Anyway,
yeah, it's like a beer crate in a shell suit. And so people do them to sort of like isolate, get away from that boominess. And also something to be aware of as well when you're playing rooms like that is sometimes the sound of your amp changes if you've got the bass amp right up against a wall. By pulling it against, like, away from the wall, sometimes that changes the sound of the amp. It depends what the situation is, and sometimes how big your amp is as well, how high it is. But I actually like to have mine up, sort of like behind me. Like, in all honesty, if I could have any amp in the world for any gig, it would be an Ampeg SVT 6x10 cab and a Aguilar DB750, which is an all valve. It's like
DB750 is not all valve.
It's like a zillion watts.
It's hybrid.
Is it hybrid? So it's like a zillion watts. It's super, because
it's an awesome amp.
Them big cabs, they just move so much air, and you can have them turned down, and they just feel There's just something about the presence of the sound, but obviously taking amps like that, around clubs and stuff is sometimes like undoable. Although our friend Chris Hargreaves actually does that. He has like a 6x10 that he takes around. But
he took it on a panto, which is a sort of British
a pantomime,
silly children's show, really, and basically ruined the panto because all anyone could hear was bass all the time. No one could hear anything. I think the thing is with live gigs, right? I worked with a singer once, and everyone was getting really stressed out. No one could hear anything. It was one of those days. It just sounded rubbish, right? And the singer, the sound guy, said to the singer, "You happy with your sound?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." And I said to her afterwards, "Were you happy with it?" She goes, "I've never ever once asked for anything from a sound man. I'm not going to start now." And I was like, "What? Are you mental?" And she was saying that her approach was, if she starts to get really engaged with what's going on out front, she loses her focus on what she's doing. Now, obviously, she needs to hear herself, so maybe she was just putting it on as an effect. She must have to at some point say, "Come on, turn it up." Yeah. But if you get fixated about your amp, and you keep turning it up and you mess around and you worry about what people hear out front, you'll lose, because you'll spend all your focus on that. And I think there comes a point where you just can't hear yourself. It sounds rubbish, and you've just got to hope it sounds good out front, and you've got to hope that the sound guy is doing a good job, but you don't know, and particularly if you play upright, then, sometimes you're playing, you just got to go on trust. You've just got to think, do everything that you can, but there reaches a point where don't fixate on it. But also stand up for yourself and ask when you need to.
If it's sort of like, if you're dealing with sound guys and stuff like that, it's in their hands.
Can I move us on into another question that links in?
Yeah.
That's the hand movement for it. So, hey guys, it's Daniel. I'm due to record some music with my band. We're considering going to the studio instead of doing homemade production. My question is, since I've never recorded in a professional studio, can you give me any tips on how to approach it, what to expect? Is there anything that I should take into consideration? What's your experience of recording? Have you got any particular things that you should?
Yeah, I do. If you're going in, it depends how you're doing it. It really have a clear vision of, are you going to record it live, as in all at the same time, or are you going to layer the tracks? So if you're going to layer the tracks, it'll probably be drums, you, and maybe a bit of rhythm guitar or something like that record the first rhythm track, and then there'll be more guitars go on top of that, keyboards or whatever, and then vocals on, and if you are sort of like, I really think you should try and get the rhythm track down first, so the drums and bass really down, then you can put the guitars and stuff on top. But when you're doing that, have the vocalist put down a guide track as well. If you're working with a vocalist, get them to put down a guide track at the same time, so they're singing along with you. It's not their final take. They can do their final take again, but it's just so it gives you a reference of, what's going on with the song. Because I've been in a situation before where I've turned up to the studio to record a song, and I've turned up and there's just a drummer, and I'm like, where's the rest of the band? And they're like, oh, don't worry, we're doing the rhythm tracks first. I'm like, okay, but how do I, it's like, luckily I've got a good, I was talking about this earlier, a good feel of form and stuff like that. But it can actually be really disastrous in the studio if you're not organised when you go in. When you're recording, I think if you're recording, eye contact is really important. So always try and sort of have eye contact with the drummer and other musicians, especially if you're recording. It's not always possible to have eye contact with everybody, but if you're recording live, if you're recording live in the studio, which if you're trying to get a lot of songs done on one day, might be the case.
That's great advice.
Yeah,
the drummer.
Yeah,
see where people are so they can finish together.
Have eye contact with the drummer, and and if there's a band leader, if it's a guitar player, generally sort of like every band will have somebody that sort of like really knows the tunes. Make sure you have eye contact with them as well. As far as the recording the bass, I generally go straight into the desk when I'm recording. I don't use an amp at all.
So I'm sorry to kind of tie us around because we've had follow-up questions, but would you, say if you were doing live, Scott, just quickly, would you split the signal so that the main board gets the raw sound through the DI, or do you mix? I'm not sure if this is actually for this question or for the previous one.
It's for the previous one, we'll go.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
But would you, basically, would you go DI, or would you get them to take an output from your amp, or would you mic the amp?
I normally go DI.
Say live and then studio, what would you do?
Studio, I'd go straight into the desk generally, or if I've got if I can get my hands on a fancy DI, I'd use the fancy DI. But I wouldn't use an amp in the studio.
And you don't when you record your lessons, do you?
I don't when I record my lessons. None of my lessons are done using an amp. If you hear that any of the single that I released last month, that wasn't done with, even though I've got an amp in the video. That was for actually when we were just running through the tunes before we recorded them, because we hadn't rehearsed the tunes. We just sort of like got together on that day and just recorded it. So we just ran through the tunes in the studio before we recorded it and then did it. But when I recorded it, the amp was turned down, off completely, and I was straight into the desk. So that's live. In the I mean that's in the studio. Sorry, live. It depends what gear I've got. I've had amps before where I've had the option to give them a DI out of the back of my amp and actually give them a signal from my EQ, so they're getting my EQ mixed in. I don't use that right now. I've got a mark bass head, and I'm actually not using the DI on the back of the mark bass head either. I generally go straight into the desk. And I've used a Reddy, Redeye?
REDDI.
REDDI.
I was thinking it was Reddy, but I don't know. Yeah.
REDDI DIs that are really nice as well. They're a Valve DI, I think. I've used a few different DIs.
I think you just got to trust the sound guys. It's a nightmare because there's a lot of bad ones out there, but there's a lot of guys that know a lot more than we do, and even if they don't know what they're doing, we can't do anything about it because we're playing the bass. So
man, I've done a gig. I did a gig for the BBC actually, and I turned it with my amp. It was live, and the sound guys were just so good.
Oh yeah, the BBC guys should be
so good. It was all in-ear monitors. I didn't even need my amp. I took my amp, I put it on stage, and halfway through the gig, I just turned it down. I was just like, I don't even need this. The sound from the in-ears was just so good. The sound out front was amazing. Like, it was just really good. So a lot of it depends on your sound guys. But yeah, so live, generally, straight into the DI, generally. And then in the studio, generally, straight into the desk. I've got a project that I really want to start up. I've done, like you'll have seen you might have seen the single that I released last month, and I've got a few more of them already recorded that I'll be releasing, one in January and one in February, and they're recorded with the same guys in the same studio. And after that is done, I'm actually. I really want to. The guitar player from that band, he's called Nick Svark. He's a fantastic guitar player. We're talking about putting kind of sort of like a retro-y kind of quartet together, sort of like with Hammond organ, Rhodesy type of thing, guitar, and kind of doing a kind of Medeski, Martin and Wood thing, John Schofield sort of like groove thing, okay, where I'll be doing a lot of P-bass stuff, Sponge Under the Bridge, and the full kind of retro thing. Now doing that, when we record that, I'm actually not sure what I'm going to be doing recording wise, because I really want to get that vintage feel. So maybe that will be a big Ampeg in the studio, micing it up and maybe mixing that with a DI. I'd always mix it. If I was going to mic an amp in a studio, I would always split it and have a DI and an amp. In fact, I've done that before. That's sort of like the level up, okay? So if you're in the studio for a week and you've got a lot of time to mess around, DI straight into the desk, but also put give them a line for your amp as well, so you've essentially got two bass signals and then you can mix them. And I think that's what I'm going to do for the tunes that we do in that band, because I really want to get sort of like a big old school sound, and I'm just going to experiment with it. So yeah, just experiment and see what your vibe is.
Yeah, if you get into that studio and there's an Ampeg SVT valve amp and it works and it sounds amazing, and the guys are comfortable using it, I think again you defer to their experience. A quick follow-on one, Scott, because we've talked about this for quite a while, but Marcus has just added in, if you're using your 212 standing on the floor, how do you hear your sound clear enough if your rig is PA'd and there's only poor monitoring? Well, I guess you'd have the amp, or you'd always have the amp up loud enough for your monitor.
Yeah, have the amp up loud enough for my monitor. Yeah. And again, that's sort of like where the old beer crate comes in, get it up sort of like so it's closer behind your head. And so for instance, where the issues come is when you've got your 212 stacked on each other, the stage is super busy, there's so many musicians on there, and say this is the front of the amp and this is your legs, and you're like this, like stood, so your head's here and the amp's here and the sound's going out here and your head's here, your ears are here, that's obviously problems. So that's when you sort of like move it up. If you look at bass players like if you look at all the festival guys, just off the top of my head, some guys I've been watching recently, Steve Swallow, the amp's right up off the floor, it's behind his head. Medeski, Martin and Wood, same thing. Chris Wood, the bass player, his amp's right off the floor. Who was I watching the other day? Larry Carlton's son. What's Larry Carlton's son called? Travis Carlton, who's a badass bass player. I love him. He messaged me on Facebook the other day.
Did he? Did he tell you to leave him alone?
He said he emailed me to tell me that I had a good tone. Oh, that's pretty cool. So Larry Carlton's son, Travis Carlton, again, sort of like he's got that sort of. Actually, I think he's got an 8x10, but again, it's right up behind his head.
The danger is if it's by your feet, you can't hear it. You turn it up,
and you're killing everybody.
So you kill everybody, and then the sound guy hasn't got anything to work with.
Yeah.
And that's where the compromise is. The sound guys want you to be silent on stage, just enough so you can hear yourselves. And we want to have more as bass players and have that feeling of really feeling and hearing the bass. But bear in mind that you're going to cause there is a point where you're going to cause problems. And if you're on a massive stadium stage, like if we're lucky enough to do those gigs, then it doesn't matter because it's enormous and the amp is like 20 feet away from the drum.
And they normally hide SVTs in.
Yeah, exactly, and there's no problem. But if you're in that bar, and you've got your 212, and you're, I've seen Scott play a few gigs where all I could hear was bass for days afterwards. Yeah. Actually, okay, so let's move on.
Was that them reggae gigs?
When you did that, the tribute one, the fundraising thing for Richard.
That was amazing. Actually.
Scott's phase when he was getting into dubstep.
I was doing sort of like a lot of reggae stuff.
Still can't hear properly.
I split my signals, so I had sort of like normal bass and then this other sub bass. It was just, it was like whales were calling in the North Sea.
It sounded like an industrial accident actually. Yeah. So Pat was talking about any tips on embellishing the melody, and say you were working, he said, for instance, if he was working on Autumn Leaves. Yeah. So, like, how would you go about doing that? Would you learn the melody? Would you,
I'd try and work in the chord tones, Pat. I'd try and learn the melody, okay? So I know where you're coming from on here, and it's really, it's a really, really cool idea, actually, that you should, try and sort of like, even when you're soloing and stuff, your solo should it's a great idea to sort of like start it with part of the melody, kind of the referencing, sort of like the. If we were going autumn, is it talking about autumn leaves?
Yeah, yeah. He says so.
So we've got. So, for instance, with that, you could actually just start the rhythmical embellishment of it. So obviously, it's playing it straight. Yeah. So try and rhythmically embellish it. So okay. So 2, a 1. So there, and I just want to. I'm remembering you playing actually. Now I was thinking about it. Don't be. You've got a habit of when you're playing, leaving the note hanging on. So. Okay, so like leaving the notes hanging on is cool, but it's also really important that we sort of like add space into the playing as well. So leaving them on and off, this is like leaving more space. And I don't mean just leaving the space, but like using staccato notes, legato notes. So ba beep beep ba, staccato ba ba beep, so ba 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 beep, do ba dee da. You know, think of like how a trumpet player would play. Okay, not a bass player, how a trumpet player would play. So once you've done that, then try and work in the chord tones. Okay, so. Yeah, so what I'm doing there is I'm using the sort of like melody as a takeoff point, and then I'm trying to sort of like, you know, work in the. It's hard to do it, you know. It'd be nice to be able to sort of
you spoke the other week about playing a bass line and then going into a solo and then mixing the bass line and a bit of each. And this is a similar thing where the three approaches for soloing that people traditionally use are elaborating on the melody, are playing arpeggios, or are playing the scales. And essentially you're going to move between the different ones. And I think, you know, using the melody is just ridiculously strong, and you know what, guys love it on bass. And what works brilliant is if you improvise and then just shove in a little quote of the melody, and so you could even like just learn one part, like the bridge of I don't know, Girl from Ipanema or something, and then just play that in your solo, and people will absolutely love it because they're not used to hearing that. Scott, just because we're kind of pushed for time, Marcus was asking about, and we're talking about Autumn Leaves, Marcus was asking about getting familiar with the chord tones and improvisation with Autumn Leaves. And he's saying when he's trying to apply the principles onto the songs, he's still having problems, he's getting lost. Is it just his impatience?
No, I used to get impatient as well, man. Don't worry about that. So let me just read the question.
It's
principles.
When I'm playing by ear, I get results sooner.
Okay, yeah, there's this kind of sort of like pain barrier you've got to go through. With Autumn Leaves, read me the entire question again so I can think about it.
I'm starting to get familiar with the chord tones and improvisation with Autumn Leaves.
Yeah.
However, when trying to apply the learnt principles on other songs and create my own grooves, I'm still pretty much getting lost. Is it just my impatience? And when I'm playing by, and when I'm, I think it means as, when I'm playing by ear, I'm getting results sooner.
Yeah, yeah. When you're working on these tunes, so are you saying that, you're sort of like, you're feeling more confident with Autumn Leaves now? You're getting the chord tones
It's that early
down.
stage, isn't it? Where it's like,
there's kind of sort of like an early stage where it's sort of like a complete pain in the arse.
And you're going with what you know, because you know how to play by ear. You're comfortable doing that, and the new learned skill is not comfortable. It's not intuitive yet. There's gonna be this element of pain. But when you bring the two things together, like when Scott was playing just then and it sounded amazing, it's because he's developed a really fantastic harmonic knowledge that he can be really creative with and just be expressive, which is why we all buzzed off what he was playing. But it takes a while to get. Well, it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah,
that's why
it's all the arpeggio exercises are kind of sort of like going. They're going all in the same direction. They're all for the same thing, to know your fretboard better. Yeah. And just to make you feel better, I can remember going to somebody for a lesson, and I was in your situation. Okay, I knew a little bit. I knew some tunes. Okay, I could get around them. I was working on my arpeggios and stuff like that. But when it came to sort of like solo and stuff like that, my ears just took over, and I just started winging it.
Marcus is pretty confident with the song. So just to say, he's pretty confident with it, but I think it's applying to the stuff. Applying it
to other stuff. Okay, so, and again, I was in the same situation as you. I was more confident with some tunes, and applying what I knew on those tunes to other tunes. I always felt a little bit shaky about it, and my ear really took over. It just took over. Especially when I was soloing, I was just, my brain just couldn't go fast enough, okay? It just took over. And I went to this guy for a lesson, and I said to him, and this was a genuine question, I said, when you're soloing, do you always know what you're playing? And he was like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. and I just felt like I couldn't think fast enough. And it's to do with more than one thing. It's to do with sort of like knowledge of the tunes. So for instance, if you're working on you're confident with Autumn Leaves, right? Because you've played it hundreds of times probably now, and you've worked on your arpeggios over that tune a lot. So your visualization on the fingerboard is good and stuff like that over that tune. So now what you need to do is take another standard and learn it as in depth as you have Autumn Leaves. And I'd really sort of like recommend doing it over sort of like a month or 2 month period, just sitting down and going through all the arpeggio exercises with that tune. It's really easy to sort of like try and learn a lot of tunes and not learn.
I suggested that actually, that like focus on one tune, and that's as good as a choice as you're going to get, because it's got all of the different chords you need.
Yeah, because a lot of the chord sequences are similar. So if you learn a few tunes really, really well, then you'll find that when you come to play other tunes, you're like, oh, that's the same as this bit. I just need to apply it, So I'd really recommend taking another tune, probably something like All the Things You Are, and really, really sort of like going to town, learning the tunes, learning the arpeggios, learning to play them from the different fingers, so... with like Autumn Leaves,
I did a gig recently, Marcus, with someone, and John Chamberlain, a piano player that we're friends with, a great piano player, and we were doing this jazz gig, and the band leader said, "What do you want to play, John?" And he goes, I don't mind. And he goes, no, it's your turn. You choose. You play something. And he goes, I don't care. He goes, it's just 2-5-1s to me. And he really didn't care. He was like, do you want to play like a Christmas tune, or should we play a jazz standard? He's like, I really don't mind. It's just the same, because all he's going to be doing is like plugging in these patterns over 2-5-1s and 1-6-2, whatever. And he's right in a way. I mean, it's the same when I'm playing standards. If I go do a jazz gig, there's tunes that I don't like as much maybe, and I prefer others. But I just want a chance to play over some changes and stick with it, because once you get those Autumn Leaves ones down.
And it's learning vocabulary as well. You need
Yeah.
to learn vocabulary.
That's what you're doing, yeah.
So, for instance, if somebody said, and this is like a big deal, right? Learning vocabulary. So it's like sort of like it's having a sentence to plug in. Okay, somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Marcus, how are you doing this today?" Okay, you don't think to yourself, "How should I answer this?" You say, you know, first of all, who's asked you? Okay, so imagine it's the boss at work. Okay, your stock answer will probably be, "Yeah, I'm doing great, man." Yeah, right. So you don't want to be like, "Oh, I'm having a really bad day," blah blah. You know, so you've got a stock answer. Okay, so somebody else comes along. Let's say, you know, your wife. You get home, your wife. Okay, or if you've got a wife, or your girlfriend, or you know. So anyway, like you get home. How's your day been? Okay, so you don't think to yourself, you know, you're just like, "Oh, it's been crap," you know, or you know, you don't think about what you're saying. You just come out with it. Then it's the same on any instrument. You need vocabulary. So, for instance, if somebody said we're playing on a C minor chord, okay, I used to, you know, when I was sort of like, you know, working away and sort of like practicing and just getting into this kind of thing, I'd have to think to myself, okay, C minor arpeggio, and if I'm playing like this, it just sounds random, right? Right, but because I've learned vocabulary by transcribing other people, okay, and getting certain lines in my playing. If somebody said, okay, play a nice line on a C minor chord, I could look. Right? I just know it's going to work. It's just like saying it. I'm thinking C minor, don't get me wrong. It's not sort of like mystery magic, you know. I'm not sort of like, I hear these guys teaching on the internet and they're just like, you know, you just got to find your own sound and you know... It's not that, okay? There is thought process
Are you
going
playing
on.
from the scale of life, Scott?
I'm playing from the scale of life, yeah. I am like thinking like C minor, right? But I have stuff that I can play on C minor. Over C minor. You know, I know that's going to sound cool. I've got these little... sentences, these words almost. This, for instance, this. That could be a word, okay? And then this. That could be a word. I'll link the two up. And then I've got... That could be a word. Okay, so I'm linking my words up. I heard an interview from... oh, well, I didn't hear it, actually. I was told about Michael Brecker, this real famous saxophone player who's died now. But he was super, super famous. And he was just a ferocious improviser. And I heard that he was being interviewed once, and the guy was like, "How do you come up with this?" And he was like, "Generally, everything I play, I've played 1,000,000 times before." Right? And that's why sometimes when you'll be trying to improvise, you feel like it's just sort of like random notes. And it's because you sort of like need to work on that vocabulary and get these lines into your playing, you know. So if I say, okay, Marcus, play something really cool, play 4 really cool things on an E major 7 chord. You need, or any major 7 chord, you know, but in this case, E major 7, okay. You need your visualization there, okay, so you can see the arpeggios, but you also need your vocabulary there. I'm not just sort of like randomly... You know, sort of like, I've got vocabulary, I know.
And the way you link that there, you know, you're playing continuum there. It sparked because you just played a major 10th and you heard that sound. I'm just presuming, whatever it was.
Yeah, I just heard that. I played something like
whatever. That sounded all of us, and it was in the key of E, I think. So you you pick up that sound, and then you think, oh, that's the idea I'm going to play with now, and I can plug it in because you'd practiced that. If you hadn't practiced it, you wouldn't have been able to extract it from the air and then develop it. And that's exactly what's happening in real time, but with less obvious stuff. So you'll play this idea, and then you can draw upon that and develop it.
On vocabulary that you've learned. And you learn vocabulary by generally transcribing other people's solos. And it's not like And you know what? I just like I can't say any one lick. I can't say, you know, this. I can't say, oh, I stole that from so and so. I've got no idea. You know, I don't actually have any licks that I've stolen from anybody.
It's like the words that we use. You know,
Yeah,
like
I
I
just-
pick up saying the word "dude" because he says it about every 3 words.
Yeah,
dude.
dude,
So,
dudes.
you know, and we develop these things from our.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like
Dude.
really organic.
Do you think we can move on because
Yeah.
we're really pushing for time, man? How about some super fast questions? Because so George has been on. He's been really patient, and he's been great on the forum as well. George Barwick.
Oh yeah, mate.
He's been awesome. And he says, "I've heard of injuries from overstretching. Could you tell me about those?"
Yeah, just what we were talking about before. You know, this kind of thing, doing that
Oh right, I was
You know.
thinking he meant like overstretching, like
instead of doing that. You know, trying to do
right, got you.
doing that. So the fingering for say like an F major 7 is that, but people actually try and go F, and then they try and hit the A while holding that F on, so it looks like that. It's insane, you know. So you know, getting used to using the right fingering, but knowing that you don't have to do that. You know, it can just easily be that. You're using the right fingering.
It's being loose, isn't it? It's about being relaxed and comfortable when you're doing it, and stretching properly and
Yeah.
taking care. And you know, me and
And
Scott
warm up
have
and stuff, you know.
have both had problems with our hands in the
Yeah.
past, and you know there were issues there. But you know, I think if you're sensible about what you're doing and try and get the blood moving through your hands before you start playing, I always try and sort of move around
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
gently do some stretches and what have you. But if you're sensible, you know, it'll be fine.
Don't do it. Yeah, don't do like crazy stretches. If it feels bad, it
We've
probably
got
is.
quite a different question here, Scott, on a completely different subject, and I think we should possibly not dwell too much on it because it's not directly music related, but it's an interesting one. So this is Bob J, and he's enjoyed being a member of SBL Insider Pro, and he's glad to have the opportunity to support the program. He's saying that has the recent membership response met your expectations, and will the additional financial resources able you to do different things? And he says, sorry for the non-bass related question, but he finds the whole business and the idea of SBL Insider. So has this meant that you're going to be able to give more stuff to the site? You
Yeah.
can do more things than you could do
Yeah.
a year ago.
Yeah, sort of like we were talking about. You know, we've been talking about adding these courses in.
Bought a new mic and he's bought a camera.
I've bought a new mic and I've bought a nice camera. Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. It's the business side to Scott's Bass Lessons is an absolute nightmare because I'm a musician, and I know nothing about business, and it's been like such a massive learning curve. You know, just huge. I can't even put into words what a sort of a roller coaster ride the last 3 years has been. 3 years, I think, is when I like registered the domain name. And it's just gone from, you know, this like little seed of an idea to this sort of like, you know, huge thing. And yeah, so the business side of it for me has just been really, really tough, a massive learning curve. I'm sort of like winging it by the seat of my pants and hoping that I'm doing everything okay. Because there's not, you know, all my friends are like full-time musicians. I've got no sort of like real business mentors or anything like that. And the recent launch of the membership site has made one thing really apparent, and that thing is that what people want are guided pathways and sort of like mini courses, sort of like, you know, where so they're going through a step-by-step thing, and lessons that relate to each other. Okay, so and the recent launch of the membership site with the campus and stuff like that, we just got so much feedback on the campus that it was just such an amazing. I was really sort of like blown away by how many people wanted that, and I was like, what an amazing resource to have, that everybody's saying this is what we need. You know, do these guided pathways. This is what we want, and that's been a real sort of just. It's quite, for me. It's quite. I feel like I don't know how to put it into words. Just sort of. I feel like responsibility to sort of like, okay, this is what I need to do. You know, there's not actually, like in the future, there's probably going to be like loads of lesson websites and stuff like that. But right now, there's only a handful. And I'm just, you know, and looking at what everybody wants, guided pathways and that work with people through, you know, step-by-step processes and stuff like that. And looking at what everybody else is doing in the sort of like base space, there's nobody really that's doing that. The only guys really that, for me, that are doing that to a good level are Berkeley online courses, and they're like $1,400 for the course, for a 12-week course, and obviously, like, you know, $1,400 is a big investment. So for me, the membership site it's given me the opportunity to sort of like find out exactly what people want, and given me the opportunity to build that, which is what we're going to start doing. Now that's what's happening. You know, I haven't really sort of like talked about it other than to you guys, saying that I'm going to be doing these guided courses and stuff like that. And I really think that Scott's Bass Lessons will be, you know, just, I think it's really going to explode, because I don't think there's anything really like that, that give you know, people, you know, I've got a certain way of teaching, and I really like the way I teach. I think I'm a good teacher, and I think that's the sort of like strongest part of Scott's Bass Lessons. And actually, from a business point of view and a personal point of view, what I really need to do is get away from the admin and the running of that side of kind of things, and basically just get behind the camera every day. Really, that's what I need to sort of like focus on. But doing that is really, really hard, because
you wouldn't believe it. Like, I mean, you wouldn't believe the man hours that Scott is putting in to running it. People say to me, "What does Scott do?" Because I'm working for him full time. We've got two other tech related people who are Sundays are working full time for us, and not to mention the graphic designers and everybody else. And they said, "What is Scott actually doing?" But it's just like there are so many things, and you know, we're really doing our best to tie it all together. And I think that with, you know, give us 3 months, and I think the whole thing will just move up a level. And what we're trying to do behind the scenes is give Scott room to do what he loves to do, which is to play and teach. Yeah. So it's
been a massive learning curve, like huge for me. Just mind blowing, but awesome. But just but the workload is just like ferocious, and that's what I need to sort of like. I'm cool with ferocious workloads, but I'm knackered. I need to get behind the camera and, you know, knocking out these courses.
Yeah.
In a ferocious manner, you know, just sort of like, you know, really sort of like coming up with the goods, and then find a way to sort of like have somebody sort of like step into my shoes, because I'm working, you know, I don't know, like probably 70 or 80 hours a week, sort of, you know, 6 days a week, 7 days a week sometimes.
I mean, it's really hard because we get a lot of people emailing us like questions and what have you directly, and it's just physically not possible to deal with it all. It's reached that point where we get so many messages that if Scott was to reply to them, he would literally, seriously never do anything else. Yeah. And I mean, I deal with them every day, and you wouldn't believe, like, it takes me all day to get through them, you know.
Sometimes it's like 50 emails, like more in a day.
Easily. And total messages is sometimes near 100 if you take into account
Facebook
and YouTube message, whatever. Anyway, I think that's
ferocious.
But the point is, we're into it.
Somebody asked it. One of you asked me sort of like how do I balance it, the work?
Oh, that was a question on the thing.
On the forum, work life, and sort of like family, and how do I justify that to my wife and stuff like that? It's really hard, man. Like, it's really hard. I get sort of like earache about it, you know. And we've got a little baby. It's just hard, and like, she's really cool as well, my wife. But I do put a lot of, you know, and like, you know, I'm sitting at the breakfast table working on a morning, you know. I don't know. I'm the same as you guys, you know. With anything, if you work a lot of hours and stuff like that, and you've got a family, it's kind of a balancing act, you know, keeping everybody happy. And I'm learning how to do it. You know, I'm just the same as you guys. I'm just learning how to do it. So maybe ask me in like 2 or 3 years, and I might have sort of like some answer, you know. But right now, it's just hard.
But you know what the interesting thing for me is coming in, because I've been working for Scott full time since August, and I've obviously known him for years and what have you, is just the amazing support that he's getting from everybody on here. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and everybody is just so positive and so kind and giving us so much room to, you know, like the technology that we're using now. We might be using a different web thing in next month for the, you know, for the bass hangs. We're really trying new things. We haven't done this before, you know, and we're really just gonna keep pushing until we find the best stuff. And that's what's at the core of it. You know, it's not like it's not in a business way that we're trying, you know, to, you know, like make loads of money. We're not, you know, what we're trying to do is to build the best possible, you know, version of Scott's Bass Lessons, to give the most that we can and get as much of Scott in, you know, behind the camera, to, so, you know, you guys have got something really cool.
Yeah, I think sort of like Scott's Bass Lessons essentially can sort of like, I think it can change sort of like, that's what I want. I know it sounds corny, but I really do think it can change people's lives, because it can, I personally believe that sort of like, you know, there's so much, you know, people have so much to give, do you know what I mean, like musically and stuff like that, but never get the chance. And I always used to think to myself, I'm a bass player, right? I'm like, you know, I'm practicing and stuff like that, and I can remember thinking about there's a bass player called Matt Garrison. He's phenomenal, right? Some of you might have heard of him, Matthew Garrison. His dad was Jimmy Garrison, okay, John Coltrane's bass player. So he's growing up, man. He's got Jimmy Garrison as his dad. Like, can you imagine having that? Can you imagine, like, when I was growing up, I used to think to myself, what are these major scales for? What do I, you know, what can I do with them, you know? So, like Matt Garrison, he doesn't have that. He just turns to his dad and says, "Hey, Jimmy," or says, "Hey, Dad."
I think,
you know,
Matt Garrison's dad I think Jimmy Garrison died when Matt Garrison was quite young, actually.
Well, I'll tell you the next part of the story.
Oh.
So, his godfather is Dave Holland.
Oh, it is. Oh,
And he went and lived with Dave Holland. So, for instance, maybe his dad died when he was younger, okay?
Yeah,
but he
I'm not sure.
turns to his godfather and says, "Hey, Dave Holland, who's like a world famous bass player, what are these major scales for?" And it's just an instant, you know, how do I play an altered scale? Oh, it's just like this.
yeah, the
Oh,
access
okay.
to information.
It's access to information, and that is what I'm trying to create with Scott's Bass Lessons. Is a really focused, so people just have somewhere to ask, you know, because it's having somewhere to ask them damn little questions, you know. I had so many questions when I was younger, you know, and I just needed someone. And if somebody, you know, and they just wasted so much of my time, you know. If I just could go somewhere and just say, you know, how do I use an altered scale over the dominant chord, you know, and somebody was just like, "I'll try this," I'd be like, "Oh, great, okay." But I just needed that little bit, you know. All you need, for instance, like I always use this analogy of sort of like, can you imagine trying to find your way to Jeff's house if you didn't have his address, right?
It's near Mike's Carpets
It's like,
in Leeds.
yeah, it's like impossible, right? It's impossible.
It's not. It's near Mike's Carpets.
But wherever you are in the world,
Right.
if I said, you know, "Oh, Jeff's address is this," you know, you could be there in like 2 or 3 days. Okay, it's just having that little bit of information. It's, you know, this isn't rocket science. Like music isn't rocket science, and you know, like playing on altered dominance or whatever, you know, even though it's like technically sort of, you know, it's if you're doing that as a bass player, you're doing really well. But again, it's not rocket science. It's just having that somebody just showing you how to do it and telling you how to apply it, and that's what you know, wanting Scott's Bass Lessons to be, with all these courses built in, and guided pathways, somewhere where people can go and just, you know, be taken care of.
Well, and on that subject, Scott, there's is that. Let's get through some quick questions.
It's Christmas, you
Let's
see.
get through some questions.
Let's get some quick ones done, actually. 'cause
Okay, listen.
I promised my wife that I'd do like a 90-minute.
And Marcus was asking how you cope with the family thing, but I think we've just touched on that.
Yeah,
there.
really hard.
But basically, she's really angry most of the time. No, she's very supportive, amazing woman. And Zuki says, is it too late to think about becoming a pro bass player at the age of, say, 36 to 38? Is that not too late to be new to the business? And thank you for asking, so that's a great question.
So my friend Lawrence Blackadder at Overwater, when I met him, he was
50.
Nah, I can't remember how old he was. He'd have been about sort of like 33. Actually, when he first started taking, he was playing bass around 30. He was playing bass from, actually maybe when he was a bit younger, but when he first started actually digging in and just thought, you know what, I want to do this, it was like way later. In fact, he's like nearly 50 now, so 15, 20. So he'd have been about 35 when he decided that he wanted to sort of like, you know, go at it and sort of like do it as a living, you know. He's the manager of these guys, of Overwater Bases. And essentially he worked his arse off, and he became from knowing sort of like a few sort of like Chili Peppers grooves, which he was really into. He was really into the Chili Peppers. He got into jazz, and he was like, he's an obsessive guy, but he really worked really hard, and he ended up getting some great gigs over in Newcastle, which is close to it, well, about sort of like an hour away from where he lives. And now he plays in a band that do a lot of corporate events and stuff like that. So he's sort of like a semi-pro player. My answer is basically yes. You know what I mean? Like, it's doable, but you've got to sort of like, he was like really dedicated to it, and really focused as well. So as long as you've got that focus, you know, you can do it.
So I'd like focusing on one being that guy that's like, are you the guy that knows all of the function repertoire? Are you the guy that does the shows? Are you that guy who's like the monster jazz guy? Whatever you feel, that I think at that stage, you know, you really want to focus in. You don't want to be trying to do everything. You don't want to be like, you know, you want to really give yourself a bit of identity, which is what we all are. You know, we're all slightly, you know, we've got our own kind of identity and things. It does tie into another question that we had from Pat, who said, he says, are you finding that there were less jobs and gigs for musicians and clubs are not paying? And I just wanted to kind of caveat that the thing is, if you are thinking about becoming a professional bass player, there is less work than ever was, and everyone I meet is saying there's no work, we're all knackered, etc. And in a way we are, but we're also still here. You know, I've just been on a show with someone, and we were literally having this conversation about how there's much less work around, and there is much less work around, but we are also still here. And I think as long as you're in it for the right reasons, that you realise that it is a very challenging way to make a living, you know, and particularly if you're, you know, and be prepared to do different things, like what Scott's done. He's been really creative about how he's doing it. You know, I do lots of different things. I do teaching, I do performance, and I think if you have those expectations and know it's going to be hard and love what you're doing, then I don't think that you've got a problem with age. I don't think that's an issue at all.
Yeah, but age isn't a problem. It's to do with sort of like how much time you can put in.
Yes, yeah.
You know, because of your age, sometimes
a bit of realism about the amount of time.
I'm 35 now, and I've got like less time because I've got like a kid and stuff like that. Even though I probably work harder now than I ever did.
So do you think there were less gigs then, Scott, than there were?
I'm kind of sort of like protected from it in a way.
Because you're working on Scott's bass lessons.
Because I'm doing Scott's bass lessons so much, and anything that I do is sort of like my own thing. I've always tried to. Yeah, I would say there is less gigs around, but I would never be kind of. Me personally, I'd just never be put off by that, really. But it's a hard way to make a living, and everybody teaches as well. Everybody, you know, everybody, sort of like everybody. There's nobody that doesn't teach.
And they're all looking at different ways of making it happen. They're all looking at, you know, like Mike Garrison runs the Shapeshifter lab thing. You know,
he runs a club, and you know, like just name a bass player. Actually, like Pino Palladino doesn't teach, I don't think. You know, sort of like, but he plays for everybody.
Well, if you're Pino, you're okay, but everyone else we've got to get.
But everybody else, you know, everybody teaches, so it's sort of
like,
you know,
Ron Carter did, John Patitucci does, everybody, you know, Yannick, Chris Tarry, obviously.
So being a professional musician, unless you're sort of like working in theatres full time or on cruise ships and things like that, generally involves teaching as well. So
can we do some last quick fire ones in the last 2 minutes, because we're going to finish.
Give me 2 more
in 2 minutes.
Give me
time.
2 more.
Oh no. That's so funny. Okay, regarding wrist position, this is from Marcus. What degree of the wrist turning toward right when playing is allowed?
Like this kind of thing. Is that right, Marcus? Do you mean like that?
Is that what you mean, Marcus? You're swinging left hand?
Like this? Or this? This? Or this? I don't know. Like, my wrist is pretty straight when I play. Like that. I'll put me. There you go. How do we do this? Like that. Even when I go down to the... So it's kind of straight. It's kind of straight.
Well, I
I'm
think
not
you're
sort of like-
aspiring to have it straight, aren't you?
Anything-
But it's also relaxed, and
Even
you're
like
not.
when I'm playing something like that, it's like... It's twisting a little bit, but... Nothing extreme, basically. If it's not hurting or anything like that, I don't see any sort of like problem in it, as long as it's not sort of like you're like contorted into some weird position. Yeah.
Dude, we've got one final question from Suki, and the question is: are they real logs behind us?
Yeah, they are. But
It's like living in a log cabin out here.
Yeah.
It's
my wife put the fire on the other day, and I think the chimney's blocked. There was smoke everywhere. She was freaking out. You know, oh, we're gonna get suffocated. I was like, oh. But yeah,
I think it's time to.
yeah. But they're real. They're real logs. Anyway, guys, thanks again for coming. You're all awesome. Tonight's been really cool. Actually,
I've loved it. Actually. It's been
have
great.
an awesome Christmas. Eat loads of good food.
Yeah,
Get fat. I wonder if fat helps groove.
definitely. The fatter you are, the
I'm
better
going to
you
eat
groove.
loads of turkey this year anyway. And I will see you. Oh, do you know what? Just on a bit. And I should have put this at the beginning. Actually, I should have said this. The Baesang thing, sort of like it's sort of like I've always said it's sort of like once a month. I've decided that I'm going to do it once every 2 weeks actually, because they're so cool, and I think it really sort of like just helps me to connect with you guys, and I just and that's what I want to do. So hopefully it'll be cool with you guys that we want to do them once every 2 weeks, and it just means that if you can't make one, it's sort of like not so we haven't got everybody trying to sort of like rush and get on one. It sort of like opens it up a little bit and makes it a bit more chilled. So I can't even remember what the date for the next base hang.
We haven't sorted it, but
We'll put it up anyway. But yeah, and we've got some cool sort of like new website things as well. I've got the designer working on some sort of like new dashboard bits as well, and stuff to make it a little bit more easier to navigate around the site. So when you're logged in, you'll see different things than when you're not logged in. So there'll be no sort of boxes asking you to sort of like put your email in and stuff like that. They'll all disappear. So yeah. Anyway, right. I'll see you all soon. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the shed. Have a great Christmas and a new year. Take it easy.
thanks so much, everyone. Have a fantastic 2014. Cheers.
See you in a bit.